Welcome, power plugs from around the globe. Know this, every life is a story. In the last chapter, I asked you to listen to the story that you're telling about your own life. I asked you to listen to the way it sounds to make the determination if your foundation is sound or not. If you have found issues with your foundation, plug into this next chapter, the rewrite, to learn some strategies and solutions to fix those issues. I was recently encouraged to rewatch the most recent version of the movie Total Recall. Basically, there's a man who's a factory worker who starts to question his life because he doesn't feel like he's living his truth. He knows something is wrong, but he can't put his finger on it. And everybody in his immediate circle is telling him otherwise, telling him to settle, telling him that this is all there is. This entire time, he was living a lie for so long that he couldn't differentiate his dreams from his memories of the life that he lived before. He finds a video that explains to him everything that you know about yourself is a lie. They changed your name. They stole your memories. They took everything away from you that is you. And this video was of his old self. But he didn't have time to fill in the blanks. Later on in the film, he finds somebody who knew him before and asks, please tell me who it was that I used to be. And the advice was, rather than do that, the answer can be found in yourself by looking in your heart. You need to become the person that you wish to be now. That is the true version of you. So power plugs, your story is your story. The facts are still the facts. But what has occurred does not determine what happens next. You determine that. Realize that up until now, you have been only telling the first draft of your story. The most important thing about this draft is that it raises your awareness to the fact that you need to complete this next step called the rewrite. It's your perspective about what has occurred and what you have learned from the trials that prepares you for what's ahead. When your perspective changes, your story changes too. If when you play back the story of your life and it sounds like a tragedy, then you know you simply need to fix your foundational truth. For the sake of time, we'll go over the basics. I go into much more in-depth principles in strategy sessions. So in order to fix your foundational truth, we'll go over just 3 concepts. 1, reputation. The beliefs that are generally held about someone or something. What everyone else thinks based off what they've seen or what they're willing to accept. The second being character. The mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. And third, premise. A premise makes a declarative statement about its subject matter. A true or false statement that helps form the body of an argument, which logically leads to a true or false conclusion. If your foundational truth needs to be fixed, then know that these 3 concepts do not match. In every great story, the author needs to know his character thoroughly, and his character needs to match the premise. So what is the declarative statement that you're making about your life? In the aforementioned movie, the man who was the factory worker felt like something was wrong because his character did not match his reputation. He had the reputation for this underachieving factory worker who's just trying to make the best of things, but secretly he knew there was more. He knew that something did not match. He knew that his foundational truth was off. He knew that there was a real purpose why he was there. He just couldn't figure it out because of all the voices and the noise around him. So let's take a second and clarify what story is. The story is simply a blueprint. You have a character who's going after goals in spite of their obstacles. If you want to fix your foundational truth, your character has to match your premise, and that is how you can change your reputation. The late great Michael K. Williams performed a very brilliant and very important piece of art entitled The Typecast. He has an in-depth conversation with various versions of himself who, just like the man in Total Recall, is questioning his life because he feels like something is wrong. It's so ironic that the series that he performed this in is called Question Your Answers. And the premise of this conversation that he's having is this: are we limiting ourselves and our potential when we know that we could be so much more just because we're good at portraying a role that fits the reputation that people expect from us? When you realize the life that you're living isn't according to the truth of who you are, the greatness that lives inside of you, it is imperative that you do whatever you need to do to fix it, because your very life could depend on it. Unfortunately, our late great brother did not live past the first draft of his life. The PG version of this conversation starts off with only 2 versions of himself. And as the conversation continues, more show up. So it begins with one version asking, "Are we being typecast?" The other says, "Is a cat being typecast?" The other says, "Well, what if we moved to a new neighborhood? We started hanging out with the poodle crowd and we started doing poodle things and became a poodle." The other version says, "Well, you'd still be a cat." But what if he convinced himself that he was a poodle and everyone else that he was a poodle? Wouldn't that make him a poodle? He's like, "We're good exactly the way we are, but you do have a point." He's asking this question because he's reached the limits of the role that he's been playing and it's bothering him. He's uncomfortable, but the other version is comfortable being uncomfortable, but he's starting to make a point with him. And that's when the other one shows up. Now, this is the one who wants to stick to the first draft of the script. I would even call this version of himself reputation. He says, "That metaphor is garbage. You think we don't all have a role to play?" Reputation brings up one of Michael's famous roles that he plays, Omar in The Wire. The interesting thing about this is he makes it synonymous with himself, as we will see shortly. He says, "Do you think we could play a president?" And the first version says, "I think that we could." And Reputation says, "I think that you're gonna always play some form of gangster Mike. Southern gangster Mike, old-timey gangster Mike." And the first version of himself says, "But I'm not a gangster. Everybody who knows me knows that." And this is something that I want to throw in that was mind-blowing. Our reputation, they say, precedes us. How many people do we actually allow to really know us, the real us, and how many people are willing to accept the real us that differs from our reputation. I will call the very first version of himself who starts to question and is troubled his character, because it's his mental and moral distinctive qualities that's challenging his reputation. But when we don't allow people to know the real us, all they know is the reputation of the roles that we play. And that can be a very lonely place when you're starting to question, am I my reputation or am I my character? Who am I? And character continues on to say, I chose these roles. I made this path for myself. And then the comfortable version of himself says, did you though? And that's when reputation takes the ball and runs with it. He says, yeah, did you? You think we would be doing what we are doing if we had a choice? He said, face it, we come from a certain type of people that come from a certain type of place that look a certain type of way. You know what that makes us? That makes us typecast. Reputation speaks of survival because everybody comes from a different place. Everybody has a different set of circumstances that are their obstacle, their character's obstacle, that are meant to be overcome, not succumbed to. Because in a different chapter, I talk about how we are not our geographical location. We are not our experiences. And character responds, look, if I was typecast, I would be, and this is where it gets real eerie. He said, I would be either in prison or dead by now, but I'm here. I got out. I got myself out. And this gives us context as to where Michael K. Williams must have come from. There's a brilliance that and a greatness that lives within us, and sometimes we try to go for the only option we think can get us out of this situation by doing instead of being. For example, the kid from the hood who thinks the only means of getting out of the ghetto is through sports. Michael K. Williams must have felt from the context of this piece that the only way for him to get out was through his ability to act, but only portraying a role that he felt people would accept him as. My power plugs, we have to start accepting ourself, our true self. And no matter what it was that initially started that move to get us out of where we are from or where we were from, never limits what it is that we can be. That's why we have to take the pen. That's why we have to take the first draft of our life, no matter what kind of mistakes we've made, no matter what it was that we had to do to get out of whatever situation that we were in initially. We have to ball that draft up, and we have to have the courage to throw it away, even though it is what we are comfortable with, even though it is what our reputation is known for. You can change your reputation by matching your character to your premise. Keep questioning your answers. Are your answers sound? If not, we can fix that. Together we can fix it. So character says, I got out. I got myself out. And reputation comes right back and says, are you sure about that? And then there's this awkward silence as character is trying to contemplate if it's true or not. Not quite sure of his answer, but he says, yeah. And then all the other versions of himself disappear and you find him alone in the room. So don't think that when you try to question your answers and you're fighting because you know that there's something wrong, that the voice of reputation does not come and try to keep you right where you're at with a vengeance. This is why we have to ball up the first draft and we have to throw it away. If you feel like something's not right, then it's not. If you feel like you're not living your truth, then you're not. You have to have the courage to start the rewrite, to ask yourself, what is my premise? What is my character? Does my character and my premise match my reputation? If those three things are different, then this is where the work starts. This is where you take the pen and we together can start rewriting this thing. So what is it that you're after? You can make belief reality. I've shared stories of people through the AMP Hour who have done that very thing in spite of everything around them. Even myself, in spite of everything around and everything that tells you otherwise. When you know that there's more within you, you have to fight to do whatever it is that you can to outdo reputation. You can change reputation. That old reputation is nothing but the first draft of your life. There's a story in scripture about a woman whose name was Rahab. And in the first draft of her life, she was only known as a harlot. This was the reputation that she had in the place that she was from. Her reputation did not match her character, for this woman had a caring, giving heart. She knew that there was more for her, and the opportunity showed up one day. She risked everything and challenged the powers that be and showed kindness to two strangers, two spies who were a part of a group that would eventually overthrow the current powers that be, that would never see her as anything more than a harlot. In her rewrite, she becomes the person that saves her entire family and everything that they had. And some say that her lineage is connected to the most important character in all of biblical history. So that reputation changed. You have no idea the impact that your character has when you have the courage to make the rewrite in your life. It could be the one thing that changes everything for everybody who is to come in your lineage. So the challenge question is this: are you willing to toss the old script? The one that keeps you playing the role that everyone expects from you? The one that differs from the real you, that attempts to silence your dreams from becoming reality? Even if you're good, take the pen and start the rewrite. Your greatness awaits you. To change the narrative in your life, take the next step. Invest in yourself and book a life strategy coaching session with me at www.beliefinteriordesign.com. Let's start the journey of making belief reality.